all volunteer 501c3. We've been around for a little over 10 years now. And our primary mission is to basically help individuals, neighborhoods, communities become more resilient, better connected, more equitable, so that we can respond better to disasters and the ongoing emergencies that go on all the time, including the one that we're in right now. And we're always looking for more board members. If you're interested in joining us, please send us an email to info@bdpnnnetwork.org, or you can do it through our website, which is, I'll put in the chat at some point. We have some interesting programs going on. We were in the process of starting a wonderful emergency Go Kit program for seniors and people with disabilities. And we were kind of interrupted with that with the COVID pandemic, but we're back into the planning stages. If you're interested in being a part of that, there's a link for how you can be involved on our homepage of our website if you scroll down. I think that's going to be an amazing program. I also wanted to alert you to a grassroots effort that has sprung up called Berkeley Mutual Aid that falls under the umbrella of BDPNN, but that is all volunteers. That's a grassroots effort that came up and provides basically the structure for people in Berkeley and beyond to support each other during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. It's really been just awe-inspiring. Susan Snyder, who's presenting tonight, has also been involved in some of the Monday Night Resiliency Zoom sessions, which have been also super inspiring, rewarding, and calming. A lot of it was very calming, which we can all use right now. So if you want to be involved with that, that is www.berkeleymutualaid.org. And you can get a link to that from our BDPNN website as well. I wanted to let you know there is a program that we always give a shout out to, but I'm going to do it now just because I just found out about it. There's a La Miranda CERT has this wonderful program for water containers where they provide different kinds of water containers for long-term emergency storage at great prices. And the key is that you have to go pick them up. But they have been really good about working with El Cerrito CERT, and so you can pick them up at El Cerrito. Those are going to go, that is going to be available as of Monday, August 3rd. And I'll put it in the chat, the link to that. And they have some new programs there as well, including 2.5 gallon water stackers, which is good for seniors because they're easier to handle than those larger 5 gallon, and especially the 55 gallons, which anybody, even a weightlifter, has a hard time maneuvering. So if you're interested in that, and by the way, BDPNN gets a 10% commission for each person who goes to purchase for that. So if you do that, you'll be supporting BDPNN. So I think that's it. I do want to say that for people on the phone who are phoning in, if you need to raise your hand, *9, as I understand it, is the way that you do that. So just a big heads up on that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Susan Snyder, who basically introduced me to this amazing concept, I don't know how many years ago, through a CERT class. And we should make it clear, this is not an official CERT class. This is a modified Zoom version of that, bringing the skill set that comes with improv into the world of leadership in disaster situations and disaster response preparedness. I'm not going to go into a lot about her background. She can talk a little bit about that. But thank you so much, Susan, for doing this, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you, all of you, for being here, for spending this time with us tonight. And as I click the wrong thing, I'm going to say the first thing is that we're going to have a lot of space and grace with each other around the technology, because things will go wrong. So I just really want to invite you to participate fully. It is an interactive presentation. The place that the interactivity mostly happens is in the chat and in the breakout rooms. And if you're phoning in, you can participate in the breakout rooms as well. So we just want to encourage some fullness there.
And chat is at the bottom of your screen. You can float your cursor just in the middle of the bottom of the screen and you can find the little chat icon.
If you have questions or technical issues as I go, Mike and Dave and Lynn are monitoring the chat. So they will pick up and either respond to you in chat or flag me that there's a question that really needs to be answered. We're also working to have space for questions at the end, and I'll give you my email. I'm always available to talk about this topic. It is a passion of mine in life, is how we can bring the deep skills of improvisation to our disaster response. We're headed through the introductions. I'm going to do a little setting the stage for why improv in disasters. Might be self-evident. I'm going to share 2 core principles. I'll share a little bit about the research that's been done about improvisation in disasters. I could talk about that all day. And then we'll hopefully have time for a little Q&A at the end. All right. So I want to come back to see all of you. And I want to invite you for 30 seconds, if you are able to be on camera, would you please turn your camera on for the next 30 seconds so we can see you? And what we're going to do is for 30 seconds, we're going to actually use the whole space of our camera and try and touch your head visually to someone else's head. So you're going to try, because we're all in different, see, and if you get it, raise your hand, but they might move. So you have to go all the way up and all the way down. I don't see anybody's hand raised. Well, oh, I got it. Oh, a couple got it, Great, thank you, thank you. And we got a baby in the picture too, wonderful. So why do I start with that? I start with that because working with improvisation as part of our disaster training looks a lot different than the other training we do. It's a lot different, and I want to start with that so you're in the improvisational zone as we get going here. So what's improvisation? My favorite definition in this context is it's the skill of creating immediate value out of any unexpected situation. And I want to step back. I dove in so quickly, I forgot to say an important thing, which is, while you're welcome to take notes on the slides, I will provide them as a PDF at the end, and also to BDPNN, who can send them out. So if something comes by and you're like, oh, I really wanted that, you will have it at the end. So here we are. How do we create value? We're all getting a big experience in this disaster right now, because we know improvisation occurs in every disaster situation. In fact, some research have said if there's not improvisation, it's actually not a disaster. It's not a disaster until the systems break down and we have to create new ways of solving problems. So our challenge is, how do we improvise skillfully? I love this quote. Improvisation demands that you be emotionally and logistically prepared to think beyond the usual. Both parts are so important. Emotionally, what's happening inside of us. Logistically, what we're doing with what's happening outside of us. We need both. And to me, the core concept here is that the practice of improvisation is a practice of organizing chaos. One of the wonderful things about teaching in Berkeley is that there's often a lot of folks with meditation practices in the audience. And if you can think about how meditation practice functions to calm the nervous system, to calm the brain, to organize your inside. For me, I find improvisation to be a bit of that same experience, because it helps me organize the chaos if it's happening inside of me, or if it's happening outside of me. There's some more benefits to this improv practice. Through these playful experiences, we have low risk opportunities to practice these critical soft skills, communication and teamwork, right? We've all probably had an experience of planning an event and things didn't go as planned. And probably even our excellent communication skills started to break down under the pressure of things not going as planned. My initial offering for Berkeley CERT on improv was just focused on this, just on soft skill. But as we got into the work, I discovered there was so much more we could do. That it really starts to strengthen the social fabric of teams. We know there's a lot of research on this, that social connections are one of the biggest factors in community resilience. So how do we build social connections? We have potlucks, we help each other out, we have community events, we do trainings together. We can also play together. Improv practice also develops our internal resources as leaders. We get the experience of what happens inside of me when I come up against chaos, when I come up against the unexpected. And I don't know about all of you, but I have certainly found this time of shelter in place full of opportunities to develop my internal resources, professionally, personally, right? We are in a world that is functioning so dramatically differently than the world we were in for many of us, not for everybody, but for many of us, so differently than the world we were in January 1st of 2020. Let me just pause for just a moment because I can't see the chat as we're going. And just to see any questions, any comments. We're good? What I'm going to do next is share 2 core principles of improvisation. If you've ever taken an improv class or watched Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV or had any exposure to improv, theatrical or jazz, you'll probably be familiar with these. And then we'll put them into action. Core principle number 1, say yes. There are so many good reasons in disaster response to say no. So many good reasons. Safety being our overriding concern of disaster response. But in life and in disaster response, we get into a habitual no and we lose the flexibility of yes. So when we practice yes, we get reconnected to that active energy, to the connectedness of finding something to say yes to. Yes is inclusive. Yes can be expansive. And yes moves things forward. Improvisation develops the practice of yes better than anything I know. In our short time together, I'm going to ask you to do some things that might be outside your comfort zone. And I want to ask you to give yourself the gift of saying yes to discomfort or to enjoyment and find out what's there for you if you let yourself say yes to this new experience. Core improvisation principle number 2, support your partner. For all of us involved in neighborhood disaster preparedness, right, this just fits. We get this. It's the core of our work together. It's what draws us here. And when we say neighbor, we're not just talking about the person who lives next door to us, right? We have folks joining us tonight from El Cerrito and Albany and Palo Alto and Grand Terrace because we have a big picture neighbor as well as our small picture neighbor and a bunch of other layers of neighbor in between. And depending on the disaster, who our partner is might be one person, might just be Mike and I having to respond to something, but maybe it's all of us and we have to figure out how to support our partners in a different way. In general, though, I'd say supporting your partner is all about body language and energy and your words. Yes is a great word to support your partner. In this space, it's a little bit harder to get it across. We actually have to work a bit harder and be more intentional with our body language, with our energy, and with our words. If you are calling in, consider this. Even when your partner in the breakout room can't see you, there's communications research that shows when you smile before you speak, it warms up your vocal cords, and the tone in which people speak is warmer. That simple act of smiling before we speak. So working in this virtual space looks different. We can still support our partners. So here we go. Lynn, we are headed towards the breakout rooms. To the extent that it's possible to put people in pairs, that's great. It's all right if folks are in threes. This is an exercise that can be done in 2s and 3s. And Dave, be ready, because you're my volunteer to demonstrate. All right. So we're going to be in pairs. You might be in a 3. The person who has the birthday that happens next in the year will go first. So Dave, when's your birthday?
Early May.
Early May. All right, mine's in January, so I'm going to go first. That's how that goes. Really quick, dive on in. You're only going to have 3 minutes together, so you really need to jump on it to get a chance to do it. The exercise is a 2-sentence story. Alternating 1 word at a time, you and your partner are going to go back and forth telling a 2-sentence story using this very simple structure. Once upon a time, there was a, and we're going to finish that sentence 1 word at a time, Dave. And then, boom, we're at the end of the story right away because it's only 2 sentences. And we'll end it with the moral of this story is. So Dave and I are going to demonstrate in just a second. I want to copy it into chat first so that the directions are with you. Let me get those directions there. All right. Are you ready, Dave?
I'm ready.
Once.
Upon.
A.
Time.
There.
Was.
A.
Buffalo.
Who.
Roamed.
Freely.
Alone.
The.
Moral.
Of.
The.
Story.
Is.
Don't.
Ever.
Mess.
With.
A.
Buffalo.
There you go. Every story has a moral. Just like that. All right. So you're going to have 3 minutes, then you get a 60-second countdown. So if you stay to the last second, you'll have 4 minutes. See how many stories you can do with your partner. If a story goes completely out to sea and makes no sense whatsoever, throw it away and start again. Come back to once upon a time. The person with the next birthday starts, dive right in, see how many morals you can get out of this 3 minutes, and Lynn will tell you when we're ready to go.
Okay, I'm creating the rooms.
Rooms are coming. You take a breath. Remind yourself when your birthday is. And accept those invitations.
Susan, would you like me to accept an invitation to a breakout room, or should I help in another way?
You should accept. Thank you.
Okay.
And Lynn, I didn't accept. I was invited to breakout room 4.
Okay.
So someone might need to zoop there.
There's 2 there already.
Great. Thank you.
I don't understand. Is the picture that I'm seeing on the screen for breakout room 25 meaning me? How do I know which breakout room I'm supposed to go to?
Does it have an accept?
It says join.
Yes.
Yes.
Click join.
Oh, join. Okay.
All right, if you're hanging out in this room, you're going to get to play with me. So go ahead and unmute yourself. Tom, Margaret, David, Michelle, Heather, Jacqueline, Jeff, Joe, Beth, Jenny, our Tom. Come on, let's do a story. If you're in a room with another person, you can do it with them. I want to invite you to take the opportunity to do it because the learning is in the doing, obviously.
And you can always join the room that you were assigned to or
No one
put
came to my
into.
room.
All right, Desmond, let's you and I do a story.
Okay.
It's nice to see you. Once.
Upon.
A.
Hi, Lynn.
Upon. Time.
There.
Was.
A
Hungry.
boy
Who.
ate
Everything.
the
Moral.
of
The.
story.
Is.
Don't
Leave.
your
Food.
outside.
Don't leave your food outside. Excellent. I'm glad you came back, Bob, and we at least got to tell one story.
I notice our morals are don't, which is kind of like always saying no.
It's interesting. I think if we had a chance to do a lot of these, you might see more diversity. I think that we often start with don't for two reasons. One is a lot of those great fables are like very moralistic and like, no, 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 right? And I think the other reason is we start with our hesitations. And as we get more comfortable, we move into the expansiveness of it. How are we doing on time, Lynn? Are people headed back?
It looks like some people are beginning to head back. It might be time to close the breakout rooms.
Great. So as you
I'll go ahead and do that.
I'm putting it in chat. It's enjoyable. So go ahead and in chat, as you come back, what's something your partner did that made this enjoyable? How did they make this a good thing? You go ahead and put that in chat.
So the rooms are closing and they are closing in like 45 seconds.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Problem with that share screen is then I have to refine the chat. There it is. We laughed. I'm happy to rescue you from your haunted room, Desmond. Oh, a lot of empty rooms. Heavens, it seems like we had some rooms. We apologize for that. I think maybe the next breakout room we'll put people in 3s and 4s just to make sure they're more populated. Let's do that. Fun and unexpected story.
Side.
Yeah.
I guess it's over.
Had to work with the challenge of no sound. Had a partner who laughed and smiled. So great. Does anyone have a moral to share? Oh, help from the grandkids?
Yeah, so we had a story in which we found out that you don't need to hang around with other beings like you in order to have a good time.
What an excellent moral.
There you go.
Thank you for that moral. We don't need to hang out with beings like us. Let's have one more. Who's got one more moral? I see one in the chat. Always look up. Don't dive into ditches. Anyone else?
We had help your friends, and the other was counting on someone to take charge.
And wouldn't we all often like someone to take charge? I can relate to that. Oh, don't listen to stories if you want a clean room. And now I understand why my house is never clean. I spend a lot of time listening and telling stories. That must be it. These are wonderful. It thrills me, and it is this simple to start improvising together, to start opening up this space with each other. And you might say, well, where are you going with that, Susan? Let me share some of the research that supports how we can build on simple exercises like this to become more skilled leaders improvising solutions in disaster. Oh, I'm glad we're recording so we can capture all these morals, because we never want to be shy to sing like Cher, or dancing animals tend to form bands, which could be good or bad depending on the band or the animals. All right. Let's look at some of the research that look at the role of improvisation, specifically improvisation in disaster response. This is all from the Disaster Research Center at University of Delaware that beautifully has actually looked at how does improvisation function in disaster response, and I thank them deeply for this research. They define 3 types of improvisation: reproductive, adaptive, and creative. The reason I think this is useful is it can help us to know what is it we're trying to create here. So I'm going to give you a brief story to illustrate each kind, and resources for how if you want to know more about this. Reproductive improvisation. Very famous disaster, the Apollo 13 mission to the moon. For those of you who might not be space nerds, or perhaps we're not around yet, in April 1970, 2 days after the Apollo 13 mission launched, when the astronauts were 200,000 miles from Earth, an explosion started venting oxygen off the command module. The 3 astronauts moved into the lunar module as a lifeboat, while mission control scrambled to figure out how to get them back. But while they were there, a new problem emerged. The carbon dioxide levels in the lunar module were rising because it was not designed to support 3 astronauts. Famous scene from the movie, the NASA engineers say, we need to make this to fit a hole like this using this. What's on this table? And it really did go down something like that. The engineers came up with a solution that the astronauts could create with the materials they had. They read it up to the astronauts over the course of an hour. And here's what it looked like. It did the job. Then astronauts came home safely, and Commander Jim Lovell called the mission a successful failure. So that's reproductive improvisation, when you need to specifically reproduce something for a critical function. Adaptive improvisation. We're going to jump to 2005 and Hurricane Katrina. Now, by many metrics, the response to Hurricane Katrina created its own disaster. There is one notable exception, and that is from the Coast Guard. Now, the Coast Guard, its infrastructure had been damaged. It was being asked to operate outside of its usual scope, right? A lot of things are going on. And yet it showed itself to be a highly adaptable, creative organization. On the first day of rescue efforts, Joel Sayer landed on a roof from a helicopter to rescue an elderly woman. She didn't want to leave because her husband was still in the attic. He couldn't fit through the hole that she had gotten out through. Joel got the crash axe from the helicopter. It was useless on the roof materials. He convinced the woman to come with him. They marked the roof. They took her to safety. He grabbed an appropriate axe to get through roofing materials from a fire truck and went back and rescued her husband. Here's what's important about this moment. The Coast Guard immediately debriefed this and set its managers to get every chainsaw, hardcore axe, all the tools that were necessary to cut through roofs, so that by day 2, every helicopter had the tools they needed to perform that kind of rescue. So that's the adaptive, right? There's a new problem, we have a novel solution, and we spread it. So not everybody has to keep creating it. That is adaptive improvisation. Creative improvisation. I always have to pause before this story, because this story had a really big impact on me when I learned it, and it still does to talk about it. It just really changed my view of the deep power of communities responding to disaster. So on 9/11, in the immediate chaos after the planes hit the 2 towers, mariners, folks on boats all around Manhattan, looked across the water and they thought the same 2 things. People are stuck, I can help. And so they went. There had never been a plan for a waterborne evacuation of Manhattan. It didn't exist. Yet over 9 hours, over 1,000 boats, mostly private ones, rescued 500,000 people. No major injuries. It's an incredible story. The researchers at University of Delaware did over 100 oral interviews with people. And there's just example after example of this kind of creative problem solving along the way. And that it wasn't just the mariners who got folks, it was the people preparing on the piers, improvising decontamination stations, improvising communications networks so people could get in touch with their loved ones, improvising transportation networks, because people just got on a boat and you didn't know, were you going to end up on New Jersey or Long Island, right? Where's home? So to me, this is such an incredible story of creative improvisation and action. And the Coast Guard played a big role in this one too. About 2.5 hours in, the Coast Guard kind of took over being in charge, but very loosely because things were going so well. And it was a wise decision. But Lieutenant Michael Day, who was in charge that day, had a lot of worries, and he said he broke more rules that day than the whole rest of his career. But what he engaged in was vigilant rule breaking. He saw what was working and he said yes to that. He saw what was working and he supported his partners, the mariners, the tugboat captains, the ferry captains, the fishing boat captains, right? And their crews. He said yes and supported his partner, and they saved 500,000 people. I just want to pause there. That story does always fill me up. I think it's an important story. The book is American Dunkirk, and I highly recommend it. There's also YouTube documentaries that have a lot of video excerpts from first-person accounts of it if you're interested in that story. I just want to take a pause for a moment, see if there's any questions or comments before we move forward into the last section of our evening together.
You have the option of raising your hand as well as putting something in the chat, but I recommend if you have something to put in the chat, that's the way to do it. I don't know, Susan, if you want to also do a mid-session stretch where everyone just stands up who has that ability and just kind of takes their body and gets a little bit of renewal and a stretch.
Sure, Dave, I will take that and say a big yes to it. And if you are able and comfortable doing it, not only stretch up, but touch the ceiling. And if you can touch your ceiling, which as you can see, I actually can because my office is a closet, so it's kind of low. Imagine that you can go through the ceiling and touch the sky, reach all the way up there. Thank you, Dave. Definitely time for a stretch after that. And come on back. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jan, for that book recommendation. Raymond, yes, I don't have anything concise that I could tell now about the California wildfires, but there's so many stories out of Paradise about how people survived that exodus from the campfire. And I have not yet seen the new documentary, the Ron Howard documentary, but it is very much on my list up for that. So absolutely a place, because here's the thing, we show up for each other. Most people show up for each other. It's my deep belief. And the research does bear this out, that in disaster, communities come together and they pull together. But what the neighborhood network and what CERT programs and what programs like ours do is try and give people the skills to show up safer, to show up more connected, to show up more effective. And that's the big thing I think that we can get with some improvisational practice to add to our toolkit. So I just want to touch on this again before our next breakout room, is that practicing this creative improvisation develops these critical things for us. How we can organize chaos outside and inside. Our soft skills, that communication and teamwork I talked about, helps our social fabric of the people we are with, whether we just met because we're on BART together when it stops and we have to evacuate this train, right? Or whether it's our neighbor we've lived next to for 45 years, had some ups and downs with maybe. We're gonna figure out how to strengthen that social fabric. And it develops our internal resources as leaders. All right, so Lynn, we're headed to breakout room 2. And let's put people in 3s and 4s, and that way we'll make sure that everybody is at least in a room of 2. If you end up in what we call, Desmond and I called a haunted breakout room, and you don't want to do this exercise with a ghost, come back to the main room and do it with me. All right.
Just remember that whenever you're given the invite on your screen, you're going to choose the join button.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and get the breakout rooms ready.
And let me give you the instructions. So this will be in somewhere between pairs and 4s. Let me look at the time. Let's give people 4 minutes on the clock. And this time, the person who has a name that starts earlier in the alphabet goes first. If you're in a room with more than 2 people, make that alphabet work to create an imaginary circle. All right.
And I'm going to go ahead and, oh, I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
But don't invite people yet. Dave, are you ready to demonstrate?
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Dave, are you there?
Yep.
Great. So the speaker is going to hold up and share an imaginary photo of themselves 1 year from now. Imaginary photo of you 1 year from now. And you're going to describe it with some details. The listener can ask questions. If you got a curiosity, make it fun for your partner with your questions. After one photo, switch roles and the other person will share. Go around so everybody has a chance to share. If you still have time, you can keep sharing imaginary photos for the whole time. So give me just a second to post the instructions in chat, and Dave and I will demonstrate. And Dave, you get to go first because you have the earlier name in the alphabet.
So we'll see if I get this right.
All right.
I'm holding up a photo of myself, and the first thing you'll notice is I have a haircut. I am so looking forward to that time when I can cut my hair. And I'm camping, and you'll notice that I'm camping in Yosemite, and so happy, even though it's drizzling, I don't care.
And what's that you're holding in your hand in the photo?
That is a walking stick, which I always take with me whenever I go hiking. It was handed down to me.
Oh, who was it handed down from?
It was actually my grandfather to my father to me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dave. And then I would go and I would say, this is a photo of me 1 year from now, and I'll describe it. It's nice if you have something you can hold up. You can also do exactly what Dave did and hold that up. So you've got the instructions, imaginary photo, 1 year from now, person whose name starts with an earlier letter of the alphabet goes first, 4 minutes, enjoy your partner. So Lynn, whenever you're ready, you can send folks away.
Yep, we're creating the rooms now. Just
Great.
choose join.
Choose join. Hopefully everybody's getting that.
Looks like most rooms have at least 2 people active.
Great, thank you. Thank you for taking over the breakout rooms. It's a hard thing to multitask.
No problem. Give me about a minute warning so I can close the rooms.
Yes, get an eye on the, we're at about 1.5 minutes.
Okay.
Hopefully. Time flies.
It sure does.
If you want to broadcast a message saying 1 more
Yep.
minute, yeah, you're
Yep.
on it. I want to take you to all my meetings, Lynn.
And since it takes about a minute for things to close down, I want to wait about another 20 seconds before hitting the button.
I would love to do a study about the behavior of fleeing the room as soon as you get the message or waiting to the last second, being dragged out by the technology, right? Very different behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Quite.
Welcome back. As you're coming back in, I want to invite you to share in chat 3 to 6 words about your experience sharing these imaginary photos. Just 3 to 6 words. What was it like? Maybe it's about the image, maybe it's about your partner.
Okay, everybody should be back in about 5 seconds.
Great. All right, so welcome back. I'm inviting folks to put in chat 3 to 6 words about that experience. How was it? Hopeful, inspiring, joy is our first. Any 3 to 6 words? Too short.
Friendly.
Friendly.
That was great.
I'm glad it was too short. I hope you'll make everyone in your life do it with you. Right? We all need new things to talk about too. Susan, I see you could relate to that.
What's that image behind you on your left? Is that a bird?
Me?
Yeah.
My left. It is a mermaid with a turtle.
Huh. And what drew you to that?
A friend of mine who used to live in Hawaii sent it to me because she knows I love sea turtles. I think they're just the most incredible, gracious, slow creatures.
Slow. That's good.
Yeah. So.
Did your friend draw the turtle?
She didn't. I wish she had. I'd have her come draw tons of things for me. I'd want her to do a mural. She found it in an artist sale. Let's see. Experiences. Vietnam, East Bay shell mounds. You bumped into each other in Italy. That's fantastic. Focus on outdoors. Family and haircuts. Dreamy and uplifting. Thank you, everybody, for sharing these. I love where it can take us to. I love how we can use this for connection, for hope, for inspiration, for all these things. So how about this? Anybody speak to, did you notice saying yes or supporting your partner show up? You notice that happen in yourself or in them? This is seeing movies. How did you say yes? Or how did your partner say yes? What's a behavior they did that was supportive? Any of those things. Because I know they did. If you had a good time, your partner was saying yes.
They smiled.
Smiling, the participation. Bruce is noticing it feels good to say yes. Asking questions. Yeah. Interesting, showing engagement and interest in you. Beautiful, asking questions that just help their imagination open up. Rolling with the fantasy, building with ideas. Beautiful, all these ways we can say yes to each other. So here you've got this idea about becoming more skilled improvising leaders. And I ask you to really take this idea and think about, how can I use this? And if we had half an hour more, that's what we would spend the time doing. So I just want to invite you to have these conversations in your neighborhood groups with your families and your families by choice, your community by choice. How can we use this together? And I have some ideas, right? I think an important thing is about how we can cultivate this mindset through experiences and practice the skills. Looking around and saying, what can I say yes to? What's here that I can say yes to? And I honestly use this every single day, right? I'm a teacher and I'm a parent. I spend a lot of times looking for things that I can say yes to, right? What's here? What can be built on, right? What do we have? And this partner question, how can I support my partner? Whether the disaster we're dealing with comes to us from out there or comes to us from in here or between us, it doesn't matter. These skills are useful and can work. I did a workshop for Army officers a few years ago. And at the end of the workshop, one of the officers who had participated like so hardcore, full throttle, wholehearted said, you know, this has been great, but I can't do word at a time story with my master sergeant. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know your master sergeant. Maybe you can, but I'll accept this idea that you can't. So I really believe in doing the skills themselves, but I think sort of ultimately what it is can we walk through the world and approach the challenges of leading in disaster or leading at any time with these two questions in mind. Now, like I said, I really do believe in doing the activities, actually improvising together in neighborhoods and communities. There's about 1 million resources available, if you Google it, for improv activities. There are books. There are many improvisers in our community, maybe even in your neighborhood group, who would love to get people together and do something together like that. There are also folks like me who do what's called applied improvisation, which is that I design programs using improvisation for specific purposes. And as you've noticed, I like to have that research tie-in. How does this function in that? So those are the ways we can bring this together. I do, oh, excellent. We even have time for a few minutes of questions, comments, and I always welcome word at a time responses if you can figure out how to do that on Zoom.
If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we will unmute you. And you can raise your hand. I mean, you can either, I can't see everybody, so I don't know if you want to physically raise your hand, but in your chat, I'm sorry, in your Zoom, down at the bottom, you should be able to raise your hand there and then also on your name in the participant screen.
Go to reactions and you can raise your hand in the reactions icon.
That's right.
And I'm just taking a chance to scroll through gallery and look at these faces.
You know, I'd like to ask you a question, Susan, sort of touching on the notion of breaking rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a lot of us who have spent a long time in CERT, like there's a lot of rules.
There's a lot of rules.
A lot of rules. And I think that it's super smart because those are the guidelines, the structure that help you, especially in a disaster when, you know, your adrenaline is out of control, your hands are shaking. I mean, I know every time I hear a tremor, you feel a slight tremor, I notice that my hands are a little bit jittery afterwards. And in a big one, who knows? So I think those rules are sort of that structure that provide us sort of something to work with, to respond. But that notion of like, it's okay to break from that given our need to improvise, because, you know, CERT is all about trying to predict every possible scenario with the understanding that you can't predict every possible scenario. So
I think what's important is this, that it's vigilant rule breaking, that it's purposeful, and it is true to the spirit of CERT or neighborhood response or whatever the thing is that we are working on, that we can have agreement that this is the moment to break the rules. I don't know how many folks have participated in neighborhood drills or citywide drills, but just if you could say, if you've participated on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being everything worked really perfectly, what would you rate the drills that you've participated in sort of overall? Got some bigger 2, 3s, 3, got a 4. Ooh, I want to come to your neighborhood, right? And this is, you know, a lot of folks who train really hard and take it seriously and take the classes and practice the skills. Things break down. Things break down. So when we're breaking the rules in service of our mission, right, and we're keeping our core values in place, I think that is the thing. So it's not that everything is open for improvisation. You don't want people to improvise how to do CPR. You know, that's not a disaster skill, but it's the example that comes to mind. There is a way to do CPR that is effective, right? So we don't improvise that. But we can improvise the materials we use to splint someone's broken bone, right? We can improvise how we transport someone out of a dangerous situation. So if that kind of attends to that question a bit. Yes, and I agree, Yadira, we need these mistakes so badly. We need to make these mistakes in the drills because it's so much information when we make the mistakes, right? The drills are our low stakes opportunity to practice these really important skills.
Remember that you can raise your hand by the three dots that are in the bottom right-hand corner of your chat tools is raise hand. I was wrong. It occasionally happens. So
we all go
I
there
mixed
sometimes.
up my controls. Sorry about that. So yeah, the three dots, raise your hand. It'll bring your hand raised on our participant list.
Richard Swartz. Can you unmute Richard Swartz, Lynn? He's raising his hand.
He is.
I can unmute it.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that's nerve-wracking is not really being prepared on an emotional level for the intensity of a real disaster. And I studied the 1868 Hayward Fault earthquake, and it's kind of mind-boggling if that's the intensity or greater. We'll have never experienced anything like that. You know, people were getting thrown from side of the room to the other side of the room and back. If they got knocked down, they could not stand up again. So I think it's important to tell stories of what it was like in the last Hayward earthquake. And that's why the history of it, I think, is important. So we're not totally freaked and overwhelmed when and if it does appear to the intensity that it does or could. And, you know, recently they've realized that the Rogers Creek Fault is actually connected to the Hayward Fault. So the further north the epicenter is on the Hayward Fault, the more likely it could unlock both the northern Hayward Fault, like Berkeley and north, but it could also trigger the Rogers Creek Fault to erupt. And the longer the rupture, the more energy is released and the bigger it could be. So
yeah, Richard, I really love that you said about preparing for the emotional part. So the other thing that I'm the trainer for in Berkeley CERT is disaster mental health. And that it is so much about how we take care of our insides and help each other emotionally, because we cannot perform the hard skills. We cannot perform the skills when we're a wreck inside, when we need the tools to support each other, we need the tools to calm ourselves down, we need the tools to connect, right? And I just also want to share, I think history is very useful here because it shows us the scope of geologic time. And I want to throw in the first recorded government response to an earthquake was 1755 in Lisbon. And that earthquake has been assumed between 8.3 to 9.0. It was a 200-mile rupture. And what came out of that was incredible chaos, incredible like death and destruction. But also what came out of it was the first organized response and the first look at creating earthquake-safe buildings, right? And the first, so that we hold both things, right? We hold the bigness of it and doing some internal preparation for how we can be with the bigness of a disaster. Particularly someone mentioned right now in the current pandemic, this isn't the disaster I've been preparing for. I've been working on earthquakes and wildfires, right? Yeah. But that history can help us. Dr. Lucy Jones's book, The Big Ones, is great on this. about how to have perspective about natural disasters. It's on my resource list. And I just want to say, I'm not able to share my PDF in chat. I think it's because I'm not the host, but I'm certainly happy. I can give it to BDPNN to send out to registered folks. Is that a good way to do it?
Yeah, we're going to send a PDF of the presentation and anything else that you want to share, as well as some of the URLs that we shared, to the entire list of folks who registered on Eventbrite. I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to contact those people. We'll also post it to the BDPNN listserv and MailChimp as well. So yeah.
Okay, I will send it to you. I'm putting my email address in there. If anybody has questions, comments, wants to talk more about this topic, Susan Snyder at berkeley.edu is me. It's also on the PDF, you'll see. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so just to say a closing thing, and then I'm happy to hang out and talk for a few more minutes. But I want to thank you all for being here, for saying yes to the experience, for saying yes to connecting maybe in a different way on Zoom than you've had a chance to. I hope that you'll take it out in the world and use it and find this useful, this way of looking around to say yes and support your partner. I hope it is a useful thing. So thank you for being with us. And like I said, I'm happy to stay and chat a little bit more if anybody wants to.
Yeah, we'll definitely leave this open. Thank you so much. Can we unmute everyone just for a moment, Lynn, and just so we can give a hoot and a holler thank you to Susan. Thank you so much.
Yay!
Susan.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hadn't thought about it in those terms. That was great.
I think that there's somebody, we had a Jan who was interested.
Yeah, I did. I did.
I got a question.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. If we get the PDF, can we use it in another group?
When reading your list of materials, they'll come to understand.
I mean, is there a way that we can use these materials or use something like them, or?
You certainly could base it off giving, kind of, I guess you should email me and we could talk about it. I don't have a
I mean, I don't want to, plagiarize anything. I just would like to be able to share it. That's all.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I mean, I'm a volunteer here, but it is also what I do professionally, so I just have to balance.
Right. No. I don't want to violate a copyright or anything.
So just email me and we'll work something out.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, could I ask a question?
Sure, Richard.
I've been trying for 6 years to get my 2 blocks prepared, organized.
Richard, just 1 second. I'm going to mute everybody for a moment.
Good idea.
And then I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. Okay, so, and I've tried it. I mean, we used to have meetings in the beginning, and I think you spoke at one at the Live Oak School, the Thousand Oaks School Park. And that was the highlight of our 6 years. But a lot of people have moved out, and it's kind of like a new group, and now we've got like 50 something people. And I said, okay, give them short, doable little things to get started. And I said, other than putting out an active flyer, the most important thing to do is prepare your emergency water. And let's shoot for a gallon a day per person for 7 days as a minimum. And you got a month to do it. So we're going to check back in a month, and everybody report to the secretary, and we'll keep the spreadsheet, and you'll get recorded as being prepared with the water. And all the people, 8 responded. And then I said, okay, our next thing is the go bag. Here's the list of things. Shouldn't take you more than an hour and a half. Here's another month. Email me when you got it. And, there's another week and a half, but if we get like 8 or less things, I'm ready to throw up my hands because I don't know what else to do.
The big challenge of neighborhood organizing, I imagine there's a lot of folks on here who can relate. Before I moved, I was the disaster preparedness coordinator for the Halcyon neighborhood, which is giant, over 760 households. And, you know, if we could get 40 people to participate in something, it was phenomenal. And I think that statistically might be worse than 8 and 50. I'm not sure about that math. I think it's the challenge. I think maybe Dave or Lynn or Mike or some of the folks who have a Berkeley-wide neighborhood perspective could maybe talk to that more effectively.
Well, I would definitely, first of all, focus on the 8. You just got 8 people. That's huge. You got 8 people to prepare with the life-saving water. That's a step in the right direction, first of all. You know, BDPNN is all about connecting with your neighbors. You know, we always say the number one thing that you can do in terms of saving a life, preparing to save a life in a disaster, is get to know your neighbor. Just that connection alone is the biggest step. And so you made that connection. I know that in our neighborhood, Charlotte, who's on here, and I have worked really hard, and it can be super frustrating feeling like we put so much effort into this. But I think the biggest success is our block party. I'm not going to say it's my sangria, but I think that plays a big role. So I think that kind of social cohesion is the web that you build then on top of, to get people to get the water, to get their go kits, and to have the connection, and everyone sharing their information and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's not like one thing automatically leads to another. It's like you're kind of building up on all this stuff kind of all at once. That wonderful sort of, you know, people with dogs, getting to know other people with dogs, and people with kids, knowing other people with kids, and understanding that people with kids have, like, you know, a lot going on in their lives, and sometimes it's hard. So making sure that everyone understands where everyone is coming from and connecting with them is a huge part of it. One of the reasons that I love this whole notion of disaster prep is that it's for me, it's all about that building of community and connecting with people, and then watching this spiral upward, right? Like, we're better prepared for a disaster because we know each other, and we know each other better because we're better prepared for a disaster. And it just, our neighborhood keeps getting better and better. I mean, there are lots of frustrations, and Charlotte and I can share lots of stories around that with you, but our initial thing was getting 8 people to get water stuff. I mean, that, you know, that which you are super frustrated by, which I totally understand your frustration. I'm not trying to dismiss it, but that is like a huge positive step in the right direction. You got 8 people. A lot of people, you know, they reach out and they get a 0 response, and they feel super shut down. And all I can say is BDPNN is, that's what we're here for, right? Is to provide support, help you to do that, find out, you know, different ways of connecting and all that kind of stuff. And we want to be there for you. And I think in a lot of ways, that piece of the puzzle that we are so committed to is kind of the hardest, right? I mean, it's a reflection of society as a whole. And, you know, the struggles that this society has are reflected in the neighborhood interactions and all that kind of stuff. So, all I can say is, Richard, kudos to you for even making that effort, and hopefully you can find other people who you can kind of connect with the way Charlotte and I kind of found each other, and built on that, and knowing that there's going to be an ebb and flow. So, sorry, I've talked about it.
Susan, do you want to know why Halcyon is at an angle to your street?
Does it have, go for it, why?
Well, you know, all the other streets are kind of on a grid, and there's Halcyon going
little
totally different way. Well, Vicente Peralta used to live at around 51st and Telegraph. There's a little sign. And Domingo Peralta, his brother, his younger brother, lived right off Hopkins on Albina Street. Of course, there were no streets back then. Halcyon, it's believed, is the only remnant of the dirt path between Vincente's home and Domingo's home that they used to get to each other. And when the Americans showed up, they were so threatened that these 2 families had all the land and they wanted it, that they basically erased every piece of the road except what is there at Halcyon Court.
What a great piece of history of Berkeley. I did not know that.
So for those of you who don't know, Richard Schwartz is a world famous author, often about things that are going on in the East Bay and the history way back to pre-colonial times. So I highly recommend that you look at some of these books. They're fascinating reading.
Yeah, I just put in chat about, like, I think doing this work, we all need buddies. We need a buddy. And if you can have a buddy in your neighborhood, that's great. But if you don't have a buddy in your neighborhood, have a buddy who you meet at a training or a meeting. Have a buddy. I have to say, as a CERT trainer, it's been great because it put me in touch with a wider network of people who I now consider my potential buddies. And I've really learned that value of, like, oh, I'm feeling this worn down because my neighbors aren't responding and I can't get any traction on this thing. I need to talk to my buddy who can give me some perspective, some support, maybe another way to go about it. Yeah.
Thank you once again. Thank you all for attending. We'll try to send out as many materials as we can. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Coming your way.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for doing this, guys.
Have a great
Thanks,
night,
man.
everybody. Be safe, be well, improvise.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Now it's for the
Thank
after
you.
party, right? I can't hear you, Lynn. You're on mute.
On a different note, can I announce something?
Sure.
If you haven't heard this COVID a cappella harmony that the Phoenix Choir has put out, doing a cappella about COVID for the longest time.
Oh.
And it's wonderful. If you can look up either the Phoenix Choir or enchantment@hamilton.org.
Phoenix.
I've been playing it every day now. I'm memorizing their lyrics.
That's great. They're a local group?
No, they're somewhere, they talk about meters, so I don't know where they're from.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice
Thanks
to
for that,
meet
Nancy.
you.
I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Nancy.
You're welcome.
Good night, everyone.
Enjoy it. Enjoy
Be
it.
safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you all
night.
for this. Bless you.
Thank you. Thanks, everything.
Vote, 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 vote.
Good night, Charlotte. Good night, Mike.
Good night.